I gotta wear my spectacles because I'm old. Well, good evening. Before I begin, I want to thank everyone who had a hand in planning this event. And thank you for giving me a chance to share a few reflections. If you've not heard, Friday, a week ago, January 6th, was my last day as an employee of MVE Group. However, MVE and ESCO will always be part of my heart and my identity. How could they not? You see, June 6th, 1977 is the day the records show I started to work for Meta Valley Electric. The company consisted of Leroy Martin, the owner, and 4 other guys, Ray, Herbie, Sam, and Jim. I think Leroy was around 32, and he was the only one that was over 30. I was 17, just graduated from Manheim Central and Mount Joy Votech. I grew up in a construction family. In fact, my father spent his career of over 50 years at Baumgartner's store, mostly setting ceramic tile. A family friend was a home builder, and with me tagging along, my father installed ceramic tile in those homes on evenings and Saturdays. This started around the time I was 8. One day, I saw my father working with a new drill. I asked about the old one, and he showed it to me. It was caked in masonry dirt and no longer worked. Baumgartners had replaced it. I asked if I could have it, and he said, sure, why not? I was probably 10, maybe 12 years old at the time. I took it apart, I cleaned it up, I plugged it in, and it ran. When my dad saw it running, he sat me down and he said to me that he had to take it back to Baumgartner's because it was their drill. I was not happy. The next day, my dad brought the drill home. He gave it to me and told me, Roy Baumgartner Sr., God rest his soul, said I could have it. And here's the drill that launched my electric career. And yes, it runs. This drill and a few other devices I revived, such as my mom's old AM radio, got my dad thinking. In the 1970s, fiberglass tub enclosures and shower stalls appeared to be a threat to the ceramic tile business. And my father, a man who looked well to the future of his children's marketable skills, encouraged me to find a new trade. He had heard about Votech, today's career and technology centers. The Votech schools were new in the 1970s. My dad was a man with no love for school, but he had a great experience in Mr. Stoner's 9th grade shop class at Manheim Central. He dropped out of school the next year. My dad thought half days in the electrical shop would be an amazing opportunity. He was right. I still remember his words the day I was accepted into Mount Joy Votech's electrical occupations class. His words were, that's a great opportunity. Don't waste it. My dad passed away in early 2022. And today, looking out at you, I can happily say, Dad, I didn't waste it. There was one other elective class that my dad thought I should take in high school. As a Votecher, we did not have a lot of room for electives in our schedule, since you had to get all your core classes done in half days because you went to Votech half days. But at his encouragement, I did manage to take a typing class. I was a horrible, horrible typist. But when personal computers came along, I was golden. Yes, I graduated high school before IBM created the personal computer that ran on unknown. How my dad saw this stuff, I have no idea. But I hope his example encourages you to guide your kids in ways that maybe are a little out of the mainstream. It can make all the difference. Just as today, the early years of Meta Valley were full of opportunity. I think I was running my own truck within 2 years. I knew my stuff because I had a great teacher at VOTech, Jim Moeller. Mr. Moeller ended up teaching at Stevens Trade a few years after I graduated from high school. Tim Bollinger showed up at MVE a few years later with a very similar VOTech experience from the Brownstown campus. Looking back on it, I realized that both these entities, in 1984, Tim and I, along with Leroy, started ESCO as a separate entity. Within a few years, ESCO and Meta Valley Electric were running, functioning side by side. Looking back on it, I realized that both these entities were classic shoestring operations. Each of us, Leroy, Tim, and myself, had a strong faith in God and spouses who had that same faith. My wife, Audrey, has been a tremendous blessing of support and character. Please stand up. Her input and management of the household made what I did at MVE and ESCO possible, and I am sure that Tim and Leroy would say the same of Donna and Beulah. Many things could have taken us out. Some of the bumps along the way surely tested our resolve. But I must say that Leroy, Tim, and I had a bond that allowed us to pick ourselves up and move on in spite of difficulties that would have overtaken many other firms. In the early days of ESCO, it was Tim's ability to read the tech manuals on some of the new systems and figure out what they were saying that allowed us to grow that business. In the 80s and early 90s, the technology was changing so fast that what we were installing at the beginning of the year was often obsolete by the end of the year. It was a constant learning curve. As more and more stuff came from offshore, the manuals were clearly being translated from an Asian language of one sort or another. And Tim could often read that stuff and get it the first time through. At least it seemed that way to me. Later, Tim's ability with spreadsheets would be the fuel that gave us an upper hand on competition in both MV and ESCO. And I think about all the electrical contracting companies that were in the area when we started. Names like Schaefer, Stout, Mass, Yeager, even Yarnell was an electrical contractor before they became an alarm company. If you ever wonder why MVE Group is still here and many of those other firms are not, I would argue they thought they were in the electrical business, but Tim, he thought we were in business. Tim always emphasized building relationships with customers and vendors, but as much as possible viewing them as partners. But he also turned over every rock and looked carefully under each rock. Banking, insurance, vehicles, and every vendor. He had a spreadsheet, or at least a chart in his head, for all of them. And whilst other contractors fussed that they only used certain favored brands, or they didn't follow the safety, or they didn't follow the labor-saving methods because that were allowed by National Electric Code because they thought it wasn't as good as the way they had always done it. But under Tim's guidance with his spreadsheets, we innovated in many areas, in energy efficiency lighting, in prefab construction, solar, and we bought new vehicles and serviced them so that they increased their overall life. We also stayed alert for ways to improve the lives of our employees financially. We were one of the first companies to offer a health savings account, and we put in place the employee stock ownership plan in the mid-2000s. These were not all Tim's ideas, but his ability with the numbers allowed them to happen. We did learn, however, that not everything runs on numbers, at least not right away. When the electronic ballast for fluorescent lighting came out in the late 90s, Tim ran his spreadsheets and announced, "This is free money." What electronic ballast did, and frankly all energy efficiency lighting does, is provide light while reducing the amount of heat that is generated by the system. That heat is lost energy, and especially in a space where these lights are used in air conditioning, they save a lot of energy. What Tim saw right away was that a huge amount of electricity could be saved by these cooler running lighting solutions. We saw potential for these with 3-year paybacks in many circumstances. The problem was that very few in Lancaster County's small business owner community in the late 90s even understood their electric bill or were willing to spend money to save on the electric bill. But we put a good bit of effort into kilowatt reduction, even at one point forming a separate company similar to ESCO. Eventually, we just left KWR become a trade name and part of MVE, and a decade later, when the Public Utility Commission introduced the Act 129, all the electrical utilities offered rebates for lighting upgrades, and we were in the know and prepared to take advantage of the opportunity. Today, lighting upgrades is a stable part of what we do. Leroy, as the founder of the firm, was always the guy who made deals on equipment we needed to buy, and he also had 1 or 2 pet projects he was managing. And he was especially gifted in handling a difficult project which he could bring a singular focus on. He was also great in an emergency. Now, I have another show and tell piece. There are a few of you in the room who remember this story. Sometime in the late 90s, we had a potential deal to build a print shop for JDM and Amber, now IWCO, right up there near Cabela's. Only months before that project was supposed to break ground, one of our guys dropped this wrench into a 122 2000 amp switchgear at the main sorting plant at IWCO. Thankfully, no one was hurt. However, the 2000 amp switchboard completely melted down and was unsalvageable. It was Friday afternoon. We were at a very busy time. I had been running wide open all week. When I got the call, I was at the point of collapse already. I called Leroy and I told him what had happened and I asked if he could check it out. And I told him that I was exhausted. His response was, "Go home and have a good weekend, I'll take care of it." And he did. By early the next week, they had a new gear. IWCO, or at that time JDM, were happy with us that if we had never blown up their gear. That kind of stuff was absolutely in Leroy's wheelhouse. I'm leaving out a lot of stories. 45 years and 7 months is a long time. Thank you to all of you who allowed me to be part of your story. What I really want to get across tonight is how blessed I've been to work with the team that built this firm, and also to tell you that the DNA is alive and well in the team whose hands and heads now run the organization. I'm confident that Ty, Jay, Alex, working with Tim, will guide well and put in place people and systems which will allow MVE to grow sustainably. I'm also most pleased about the fact that I walked out of MVE last Friday. I could say that I'm still friends with the guys I went into business with 38 years ago. As far as I know, there is no one who worked here over those 38 years that I would be afraid of or embarrassed to walk up to on the street. We've made mistakes. We've made decisions that were not always popular. But I'm satisfied that we were a benefit to our customers, to our employees and their families, and to our community. And I'm satisfied that we stuck by our values and honored our God. And I'm satisfied that I leave you tonight in good hands. God bless.